at least once during this, so that was my one time of cackling. So thank you all for coming to my lecture recital today. I'm very excited to share with you all 6 settings of the Hexenlied poem for both well-known and underperformed composers. Some of the pieces presented tonight are performed quite frequently, such as the Mendelssohn that you just heard, as well as that have been recorded, like the Weigl that you will hear to come. But for some of these pieces, tonight may be the first time in 100 years or more that they've been publicly performed, perhaps even the first time even performed in the United States, and certainly premieres for Nazareth University. Hopefully every one of you will absorb some bit of information today to take with you on your own musical journey. So here we have a timeline that displays the lives and the dates of publication for each of the pieces. As you can see, they are mostly of the Romantic era, around 1830 to 1900, bookended by classical and 20th century postmodern piece. Despite my efforts, though, the 2 right here that are grayed could not be found, lest I take a trip to Germany and scour the holdings of the state libraries. On a side note, my cauldron can double as a tip jar, so any donations for a trip to Germany are welcome. Just saying. Ludwig Hoelty, as you can see from his dates, our poet was short-lived. He suffered from a rare malignant form of smallpox from age 9, and due to his illness, he spent a good amount of time in isolation in the country, which gave him an appreciation for nature as well as a connection to that peasant country life. Hoelty was also keenly aware of death. In addition to his own disease, he witnessed both his mother and his 2 subsequent stepmothers die. These experiences influenced his work greatly, as many poems in his collection refer to facets of death. Poems such as An Elegy to a Country Girl, The Gravedigger's Song, On the Death of a Nightingale, and more. His posthumous collection, Gedicht, is full of Volkslied, or folk songs, which resonates with that closeness to peasant life. However, Hexenlied is a bit unique considering his background. Hoelty came from a very religious family, as his father was a Protestant preacher, and Hoelty himself studied theology during his healthy periods. This is an actual excerpt of Hexenlied from Hoelty's published book of poems, with whom we have his feine Freunde, or his fine friends, to thank for saving and publishing his work after his death. Hexenlied translates literally into witch's song. To summarize the poem, the swallows are flying, and the spring flowers have blossomed. We, the coven, will gather our paraphernalia and fly on the winds to Mount Brocken, which is an actual real peak in the north-central German state of Saxony-Anhalt, not far from where Hoelty lived in Göttingen. The poem goes on to describe the coven dancing around Beelzebub, who gives the dancers silk and gold. A fire-breathing dragon delivers butter and eggs, because that's exactly what one would envision a fire-breathing dragon delivering to you, baking supplies. But the DoorDash dragon scares the neighbors such that they fall to their knees and cross themselves. The coven sneaks out night after night in the spring, leaving their men in bed. That ending line is quite interesting. Is it meant to be an insult to the character and the fidelity of women? Or is it a subtle hint at female empowerment? Of course, I'd like to think the latter. The poem is written in a sestain form, which is a 6-line verse. And in total, there are 6 verses. Lots of 6s present. Gee, I wonder why. It has an A-A-B-C-C-B rhyme scheme. As you can see, fliegt, siegt, Kranze, Tanze, wir, Tier. Lines 1 and 2, as well as of 4 and 5, are in iambic dimeter, which consists of 2 groupings of stressed or unstressed, stressed syllables. So, die Schwalbe fliegt, der Frühling sieht. Lines 3 and 6 are in amphibrachaic trimeter, 3 groupings of unstressed, stressed, unstressed syllables. Und spendet uns Blumen zum Kranze. no, I do not really expect you to approach the stage with your magnifying glasses in order to read this. This was really just me thoroughly dissecting every little text difference between the 6 settings. You know, everything from errant punctuation and capitalization to actual deviation in the wording. I'll just note the biggest variations from the original text, mostly in the hands of Fleischer and Mendelssohn. In Fleischer's setting, he changes the word here, kralichten, which means clod. More towards that realm of fairy tale. In the Mendelssohn setting, the last verse is modified in that it replaces the leaving the men in bed, und lassen die Männer im Bette, with this Juchheise, which is a sort of a hooray. Weigl uses the same text modifications for his piece as Mendelssohn does. And while both settings use very similar dramatic musical styles and ideas for this Juchheise exclamation, changing the words arguably detracts from the original text and its strong female message at the end, whether you see it as positive or negative. When analyzing all 6 of the settings, there were some musical trends that appeared in just about all of them, and this is my rainbow of musical conventions. You will hear changes in dynamics and tempo that will be highlighted in green, so slow going to fast, quiet going to soft, or vice versa, often quite suddenly and sometimes in the span of only a measure or 2. There will be lots of leaping and octave jumps in the vocal lines, and that will occur in all of the settings. That will be highlighted in purple. You will hear this theme of rising and falling, as well as a chromatic ascent or descent outlined in yellow, again emphasizing the rising and the falling motion of wind over the hills to the mountaintop. In orange, we have chaotic rhythms, not limited to trills and tremolos, but are abundant and will often be used for text or tone painting. For example, the thunderous tremolo undertones that you heard just now in the Mendelssohn, or trills mimicking witches' laughter. Red tritones and diminished chords are prominent and often used to create an atmosphere of discomfort and malevolence. And blue harmonic shifts occur between major, minor, diminished, and other unique scales that will reinforce moments of calm and serenity from the more severe mood of the stereotypical witch's coven. All or mostly all of these musical conventions will appear in each piece. However, due to time and the attention span of some of my audience members, I'll only be highlighting some of them on each scores. Also, I apologize if on the scores up here, the colors do not appear as so vibrant out there. The stage lights do seem to wash it out a bit on the screen. However, if anyone is interested in taking a closer look at my work, I would gladly share and be available after the recital. The opening Hexenlied that you heard was composed by Felix Mendelssohn, a German composer, pianist, conductor, teacher, and one of the most celebrated figures of the early Romantic period. Along with his sister Fanny, the Mendelssohn children grew up in a very intellectually stimulating environment, which included piano lessons, literature discussion groups, painting classes, and more, which explains Felix's performance debut at the very early age of 9. Kids, step it up. He toured extensively throughout Europe as a performer, composer, and conductor. Eventually, he and another accomplished composer, Robert Schumann, founded the Conservatory of Music at Leipzig, where he taught composition. Mendelssohn's Hexenlied emphasizes key aspects of Romanticism, such as greater range of pitch and dramatic contrast of dynamics, leaning into those colorful, unstable harmonies and text painting, along with long lyrical melodies. And as we will see from the score, a very colorful analysis. We notice right away the abundance of chaotic rhythms here in orange, and these patterns of rising and falling in the piano accompaniment. Mendelssohn sets the scenes with this pseudo-tremolo grounded all the time in G, with this chromatic doubled bass growing steadily to the dramatic sweeping double arpeggio right here that ushers in that first verse. The grounding in G is important because there is a frequent fluctuation between G minor, our actual key signature, and G major, which is present in these applied chords, which are underlined in blue. Also, during these moments of chromatic ascent, here, lots of other places, the G is constantly there helping us hold on to the tonic. And as we see at the top of the second page, there's this parallel chromatic motion happening between the vocal line and the accompaniment, followed by an equal contrary motion, but that G is always present. Mendelssohn creates these layers of rising and falling on a micro and a macro level. For example, on the second page in the third system, we see the treble has this very fast gesture of rising and falling. And while underneath, there's this gradual rising, as well as this medium rising and falling right here. The vocal line also creates these sweeping shapes that are quite literally the embodiment of the wind riding up and down the hills to the mountaintop. The piece repeats for a second verse and then continues here to the third verse, but then it gets interrupted by a moment of relative calm accentuated by these G major tremolos, perhaps mimicking twinkling of stars, a calm moment before the final climb. The slow climb to the mountaintop begins again down here and culminates with an octave leap that almost announces the witches' arrival to their destination. We are expecting this verse to end, as it had the previous two times in the G minor tonic, as it seems to follow the same structure here as the introduction. But at that last cadence and that last rise and fall, Mendelssohn employs the Picardy third, turning G minor into G major. It shouldn't be too much of a surprise to us, as he has arguably been hinting at it throughout the entire piece by teasing us with all of these applied chords in blue. Mendelssohn's Hexenlied is a fun, topsy-turvy piece with layers of dramatic shaping throughout for both performers. Our next Hexenlied comes from Friedrich Fleischer, who's a relatively unknown and underperformed German composer. He obtained the position of a ducal court music master, where he played the organ and taught the German princess and composer, the Duchess Anna Amalia of Weimar. He was highly influenced by C.P.E. Bach, and though his keyboard playing was considered virtuosic, his compositions were considered less so. Fleischer's setting of Hexenlied comes from the collection of various songs from good poets and sound artists. And from the information page that we can see translated here, the process seems akin to those 1990s CD subscription services where various pieces of music could be yours every month for the low, low price of 10 Kreutzer, featuring such other not so well-known composers as Johann Reichert, Johann Schoenfeld, and George Benda. But actually, George Benda is probably the most well-known person from this collection. This is the original excerpt from the collection. As mentioned earlier, we noticed that there are only 5 of the 6 verses that Hoelty wrote. It is not known, though, whether the omission of the verse was a decision by Fleischer himself or by the editor of the collection, Johann Michael Schmidt. You'll also notice that it is written in a keyboard style. There is no separate vocal line. Everything is together. This most likely means that the singer would be accompanying themselves for the piece. I'm just going to pause right here and say nope, not accompanying myself on this piece. That would not be pleasant for anybody. You're also going to notice that it is written up here in a soprano clef and not our modern-day treble clef. For all these reasons, I chose to transcribe the piece into modern art notation. But as such, the piece raised some questions as to what would be the best transposition practice when taking it from a keyboard style to a vocal score. So I consulted with one of our resident experts on theory and German classical composition, Dr. John Reef, and came up with a modern transcription of the score. He advised that it would be common practice for the accompaniment to reinforce the melodic line. So I added supportive notes in the melodic line into the blocked chords on the downbeats and the pickups, as you can see throughout the piece. The middle of the piece, which is highlighted in blue, features a very brief descending step sequence in a 5-to-1 pattern using secondary dominant chords, while the vocal line exhibits a bit of acrobatics. We have leaps, one right after the other, starting in the second system, outlined in purple. Let's see, we have up a minor sixth, down an octave, up an octave, down a minor seventh, up through the minor seventh through the fifth, down a minor seventh, up a minor seventh through the fifth again, down a minor sixth, all in the span of these 3 measures. And on top of that, the accompaniment drops out in places, leaving the vocalist without harmonic support. Arguably, this is Fleischer building some dramatic pressure. The accompaniment returns to its aforementioned block chords as the vocal line shifts into a smoother stepwise motion, rising and falling, culminating into a landing, so to speak, with this octave C jump. Rinse and repeat 4 more times, while also making each verse sound unique. And there's the rub. On the surface, this piece looks fairly easy, but once dissected, we see the layers of challenges that a simple strophic 1-page piece can contain. And I give you Fleischer's Hexenlied.
Die Schwalbe fliegt, der Frühling singt und spendet uns Blumen zum Kranze. Und huschen wir aus der Tür und fliegen zum prächtigen Tanze. Und fliegen zum prächtigen Tanze. Ein schwarzer Bock, ein Besenstock, die Ofen oben der Wolken. Hast du uns geschwind wie Blitz und Wind durch sausende Lüfte zum Brocken, durch sausende Lüfte zum Brocken. Und Besenbob verheißt den Trub und tanzenden Gaben auf Gaben. Cesare schön in seine Gehen und Töpfe voll Gold sich raben, und Töpfe voll Gold sich raben. Und Beelzebub tanzt durch unser Trupp und küsst in die dampfende Hände. Ein Geisterschwarm, was du uns verraten, und schwinget im tanzende Brände, und schwinget im tanzende Brände. Die Schwalbe fliegt, der Frühling singt, und Blumen entblumen die Wetter. Und huschen wir aus der Tür und lassen die Männer im Bette, und lassen die Männer im Bette.
Like Mendelssohn, Josephine Lang was raised in a very musically inclined environment. And also, like Mendelssohn, she made her piano performance debut quite early at the age of 11. Again, looking at you guys. Now, speaking of Mendelssohn again, at the age of 15, Josephine Lang performed an informal recital at her godparents' house for Felix Mendelssohn, coincidentally playing her own setting of Hexenlied. So impressed was he that Mendelssohn gave her lessons in theory and recommended that she study music in Berlin. Lang's father declined, but too bad for Dad, she still grew up to become a professional singer in the Munich court, teaching voice and piano and composing over 150 pieces of music, mostly for voice and piano. This excerpt comes from Dr. Harald Krebs' biography on Josephine Lawton. Dr. Krebs is a newly retired distinguished professor from the University of Victoria in British Columbia, Canada, who graciously gave me his transcription of Long's Hexenlied. Due to some German state permissions, he was unable to share with me Long's original autograph of the piece, but I'm grateful to him for allowing me to use it and edit his version. Dr. Krebs' transcription had included just the first verse. He noted that the manuscript had the subsequent verses under the music, similarly to Fleischer's original manuscript. I was able to revise his transcription to include all of the verses in line with the music, to which he consulted as a native German speaker, thus giving me the correct placement for syllabic emphasis and any additional notes and ties. In our correspondence, both Dr. Krebs and I wondered at the potential influence of Mendelssohn's setting on Lang's. At this time, there's no conclusive evidence that it did, but Dr. Krebs did mention that the notebook containing Lang's Hexenlied also contained copies of pieces from Mendelssohn's Opus 19 for piano. So Mendelssohn's Hexenlied is from an even earlier Opus, number 8. So it's not out of the realm of possibility that she was familiar with his setting and that it influenced her setting, but further research into her notebooks and journals would be needed. Again, trip to Germany. One potential area of influence could possibly be seen in this middle section, starting at the bottom of the page to the top of the next. There's a slow ascent in the vocal line with a pause on the repeated F, while the bass takes over the chromatic ascent, culminating in this dramatic apex of the piece, only to fall again in a final cadence similar to Mendelssohn's figurative climb to the mountaintop and landing as mentioned earlier. Similarly to Fleischer, we see the use of applied chords in blue to add layers of harmonic contrast. Not present in any of the other settings is this brief dance-like boom-chuck rhythm, that is a technical term, Philip, which helps to break up the chordal doubling of the melodic line that is present throughout the piece. It also creates a lighter, bouncier mood before the more dramatic ascent. And so I give you Josephine Long's Hexenlied.
Die Schwalbe fliegt, der Frühling singt und schwindet uns Blumen zum Kranze. Holt mich wieder leises Altar und fliegen zum prächtigen Tanze, und fliegen zum prächtigen Tanze. Ein schwarzer Rock, ein Besenschlag, die Hofe Gabel der Wogen, reißt uns geschwind wie Blitz und Wind, durch sausende Luft und zum Bogen, durch sausende Luft und zum Bogen. Und Bild zum Bob tanzt unser Trub und küsst in die kralligen Hände. Ein Geisterschwarm fasst uns herum und schwingt im Tanz in die Brände, und schwingt im Tanz in die Brände. Und Beelzebub verlässt den Trab der tanzenden Gaben auf Gaben. Sie sollen schön im Seide gehen und tapfer voll Wolle sie haben, und tapfer voll Wolle sie haben. Ein Feuerdrachen fliegt das Tag und bringet uns Butter und Tage. Die Nachbarn dann sehen, die Wut gehen wehen und schlagen ein Kreuz vor den Weih, und schlagen ein Kreuz vor den Weih. Die Schwalbe fliegt, der Frühling singt und Blumen entblühen die Wette. Holt mich wieder leises Altar und lassen die Männer im Bette, und lassen die Männer im Bette.
Jan Kalivoda graduated from the Prague Conservatory with honors and joined the Prague Theatre Orchestra as a violinist, his virtuosity allowing him to tour Europe. He spent the next 40 years of his career as Kapellmeister and composer in the service of the court of Prince Karl II, where he wrote over 450 works ranging from Lieder to opera. Despite this, he was never established into the mainstream repertoire, arguably due to some unfavorable criticism from one Robert Schumann. I just want to pause real quick and give appreciation to the beauty of this handwritten manuscript and cursive writing that only the older folks in the audience, such as myself, will be able to read. Though it was not completely necessary, it's a very readable score. I did decide to transcribe this into modern notation, and it was actually quite fun to do. Identifying all those little nuances of the handwriting and the harmonic progressions was quite fulfilling. I know, nerd. The piece starts with this very catchy double octave introduction, which is exclusive just to the accompaniment. We don't hear this tune anywhere else in the piece, possibly as a variation in the vocal line in measures 36 through 37, but that's a bit of a stretch. Once the melodic line begins, you may notice that something feels a bit awry, that the piano and the vocal line aren't completely syncing together, yet aren't completely off. And it's this rhythm here in orange that we can see, which is consistent in the accompaniment throughout the piece. These broken rocking chords are actually written like they belong in a duple meter instead of the prescribed triple meter. In this piece, we are in 3. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. As we can see, it's emphasized in the bass line with the 3 notes. But this top rhythm right here, ba-da-bum, 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 1 and 2, 1 and 2, 1 and 2, feels very non-intuitive for a piece where everything else is obviously in 3. And I think it's on purpose. I mean, how better to create an unsettling and malevolent atmosphere than to have this incongruent rhythm maintaining this tension? This is the first piece where we see a true modulation, where we actually feel like we have transferred into another key. We have parallel transformation up here at the top of the page in blue on the dominant of a half cadence to the minor dominant. We're then immediately thrown into this interesting descending fourth, ascending third, 1 to 5 sequence that also includes a suspension. It's also like, wait for it, you guys, fourth species counterpoint. Yeah, all you students out there, go ahead, groan. It's okay. All right, but brace yourselves because I'm also going to mention pivot chords. Okay, right here at the bottom of 2, we see that we pivot back to our original key signature so as to end in D minor. Another convention present in this piece are those yellow slow descents in the bass line during numerous points. We have this very, very long, slow descending line. The melodic line is well balanced, though, with equal amounts of leaps to the fluid stepwise motions, which is pleasant for the vocalist. Kalivoda chose to take 3 of Hoelty's verses and combine them into just 1 verse, creating a long 2-verse strophic piece. So, rinse and repeat. And I give you Kalivoda.
Seid der Gehen und Stopfe voll Goldes
An Austrian-born composer, Karl Weigl attended the Vienna Music Academy and the University of Vienna, receiving a doctorate in music and then going on to teach theory and composition at the Vienna City Conservatory and the University of Vienna. And the advent of World War II, though, changed Weigl's life completely. As a Jewish composer, his work was systematically persecuted, and fearing for his life and the lives of his family, he emigrated to the US in 1938. Luckily, he was able to continue his teaching career at Brooklyn College, Boston Conservatory, and the Philadelphia Musical Academy. His style encompasses the postmodernist movement's use of chromaticism, polyphony, and pseudo-atonality, but he's still able to keep it melodious with hints of consonance and a clear structure. The Karl Weigl Foundation was generous enough to allow me to have a copy of this piece. The piece is written for voice and string quartet, and as such, there is no piano reduction available. Also, there is no modern transcription ready for publication, and the only copies, again, are handwritten. And as you can see, yes, this piece is as chaotic sounding as it is looking. It's very colorful and multiple interpretations of the expression. I actually had to add another color into the mix. Because we are now analyzing a string quartet, we have different methods of playing those instruments, which Weigl utilizes frequently. The peach color, which unfortunately you can't really see up on the screen, but just trust me that it's there. It represents every time the strings go from arco on the bow to pizzicato or plucking. And you're going to see that it's quite often and quite quickly that these transitions happen. It creates multiple layers of texture for the piece. We can also see that there is this chromatic motif happening here in orange that is passed along the strings, akin to a call and response. Now, this could be a representation of a literal call and response between the witches as they are flying on the wing to the mountaintop. Because this piece was written in a postmodernist era that emphasized the non-traditional, a traditional Roman numeral analysis is inapplicable for the majority of the score. One main reason is that the piece utilizes tritones and diminished chords frequently, which are inherently difficult to attach a definitive function due to them having 4 different ways of identification. We can see the melodic line here, quite leapy, and actually takes the literal shape of mountains. There is also this vocal motif in blue, outlined here, that recurs in various harmonic forms. Here, we have it from D flat to G major, traditional 5-1, and then it goes up a half step to here to D to G, then a minor translation from D to G minor. Like some modern popular music, this piece has an A-A-B-A form. Verse, verse, bridge, verse. And during the bridge material here at the bottom of 2, we see that the cello part gets the piece. It's my cello, thank you, my cello players in the back. Okay, they get the original verse melody. Before now, the strings and the vocal line have been pretty independent of each other. The strings share ideas, but not with the vocal line. The vocal melody is now going to seep in and circulate throughout the strings. The violas now pick it up. Any violas in there? No violas? No, I'm the only viola person. Okay, I'm the only viola person in the audience, and I'll tell you that the violas never get the melody. So, violas, yay, you guys get the melody for like 4 measures before we transition back into a verse. As we skip to the end, we see that this vocal motif, again, returns in blue. And much like Mendelssohn's ending, we have this repetitive Yuchaisa chant happening here in the middle of the page that culminates on a sustained G in the end. Now, because this piece is longer and has more instruments, I'm only able to touch on a few of the layers and intricacies of this piece, but there are many, many more, and I highly recommend that if you're interested in this piece, come and see me, because it is a fabulous piece. And now the bad news. Despite my many months of emails and correspondences, I was unable to find a string quartet that could play with me today. Luckily, the Weigl Foundation has generously shared a wonderful recording of the piece from 1969 featuring the mezzo-soprano Betty Allen and the Iowa String Quartet. that was a cool piece, wasn't it? That was pretty cool. That was a pretty cool piece. Nobody asked emotion. So another musician born into a musically inclined family, all these musically inclined families. Franz Paul Lachner was taught piano and organ from his father and made an early living as an organist, music teacher, and instrumentalist. He became a conductor in Munich and was awarded an honorary PhD from the University of Munich. Unfortunately, Lachner was heavily encouraged to retire from his post early due to some personal confrontations with one Richard Wagner upon his arrival in Munich. Details into the specific confrontations are lacking, but it is also known that Lachner's vacant post was then filled by a student of Wagner's. Lachner's musical stylings were highly influenced by none other than our old friend Mendelssohn, reflecting that essence of romanticism expressed with a mix of elaborate harmonic progressions, chromaticism, and traditional tonicism. Now, as you can see, that this is a voiced for a treble trio. The first page of this last piece seems a bit lackluster. There's not much in color going on here at first glance, with the exception of the fine piano textures that are present throughout the piece and are exquisitely played by Dr. Chang. Everybody, please, Dr. Chang. Very grateful for our collaboration these past 2.5, 3-ish years. As the piece continues, though, Lachner amps up the vocal difficulty. We have these unison octave leaps happening here, sometimes even more than an octave. Crunchy tritones shifting between the voices for 3 straight measures. And there's the dynamics that are outlined in what appears to be lime green on this one. That's one of the biggest features of this piece, this constant fluctuation between quiet, almost scheming piano moments and the forte declamatory. These conventions are present on just about every page as we modulate to the parallel major in the middle of the section. And again, octaves and leaps, dramatic shifts, especially you can see here, and then return to the B minor section, as we can see here at the top of 3, as we usher in the final pages. We have this descending call and response transition in yellow in the vocal lines, while simultaneously the piano is playing up in contrary motion. Lachner then utilizes the flat 2 chord. Everybody remember John Reef and the flat 2 chord, that Neapolitan, as the predominant to the dominant 5/7, as the vocal lines have this moment of dissonance here, as there is a major second in the upper and middle voices stacked on top of a tritone in that middle and bottom voice, as Dr. Holmquist would say, spicy. Unexpectedly, Lachner shifts into unison at the very end, at the bottom of page 2 here, to transition to that main theme in pianissimo. So he is expertly toying with the audience by building the suspense, leveling off, building the suspense, leveling off. We aren't really sure when the piece has come to its final climax. All throughout the piece, Lachner has sort of been shifting from this B minor to B major, and he finally makes the decision to end it on the B major. But everybody has some final acrobatics to do. The accompaniment has these sweeping, rising and falling, very fast motions here in yellow, as the vocal lines have more leaps, culminating in this 3-octave split. I have the pleasure to welcome to the stage and thank profusely 2 of my peers who joined me for this piece. Madeline Downing, who's a soprano from the studio of Dr. Hannigan, a junior double major in music therapy and music performance, and Meg Lawton, a mezzo-soprano from the studio of Dr. Kilkenny, who is a junior double major in music education and music performance. Ladies, welcome you.
Die Schwalbe fliegt, der Frühling sieht und spendet uns Blumen zum Kranze. Bald huschen wir leis aus der Tür und fliegen zum prächtigen Tanze. Ein schwarzer Brock, ein Besenschwall, die Hoffnung gab und den Wogen, reißt uns geschickt wie Blitz und Wind, durch sausende Lüfte zum Morgen. Reißt uns geschickt wie Blitz und Wind, durch sausende Lüfte zum Morgen. Am Berze bockt uns dutzend Grab und köstet die kalten Hände. Ein Gästeschmack fasst uns beim Mund und schenket im Tanz in die Brände. Und schenket im Tanz in die Brände. Und mit Silber verheißt der Tanz in den Gaben auf Gaben. Sie soll schön in Seiden und Töpfe verrollte sich Graben. Ein Feuerdrach umfliegt das Dach und bringt uns gute Reihe. Die Nachbarn sind tief im Gewinn und schlagen ein Kreuz vor den Feuer und schlagen Kreuz vor den Feuer. Die Schale fliegt, der Frühling sieht und Blumen die Wette. Bald huschen wir leis aus der Tür und lassen die Männer im Bett. Bald huschen die leis aus der Tür und lassen die Männer und lassen die Männer und huschen leis und lassen die Männer und lassen die Männer und huschen wir leis aus der Tür und lassen die Männer im Bett. Und huschen wir leis aus der Tür und lassen die Männer im Bett. Die Schwalbe fliegt, der Frühling singt und Blumen entblumen die Welt. Und huschen wir leis aus der Tür und lassen die Männer im Bett. Und huschen wir leis aus der Tür und huschen wir leis aus der Tür und lassen die Männer im Bett. Und lassen die Männer im Bett. Und lassen die Männer im Bett. Und lassen die Männer im Bett.
So thank you all for joining us this evening. Special thanks to my voice teacher, Dr. Nicholas Kilkenny, for his guidance in this project and growth in my craft. It's been a pleasure performing for all this evening. If you have any questions, I'm going to sit myself right down there because I've been standing for the past hour or so, and please feel free to come up and ask me any questions. And there you go, Philip. There are your sources because I know you're going to ask me lately. So thank you all again for coming. I hope you enjoyed yourselves.